If you can, imagine for a minute what the start of World War III would be like. It would be a nuclear war and possibly the end of civilization as we know it. We'd probably get a 3 to 5 minute warning maximum of incoming nuclear missiles to the UK. I'd probably be introducing a video like this and then get randomly interrupted by a news bulletin.
This is BBC Television from London. Normal programming has been suspended.
This is an emergency broadcast from the BBC. Information of a possible nuclear strike against this country has been received. The current threat level is critical. Civilians are advised to stay in their homes. Evacuations are currently taking place in the London area. All motorways and airports have been closed for military use. Please stand by and await further information. Information of a
attack warning red. Attack warning red. Seek immediate shelter. Seek immediate shelter.
Okay, so that would be pretty scary, wouldn't it? It'd be terrifying. We'd be running around like mad ants trying to find somewhere where we could survive, and it would be crazy. I'd try and take Big G with me. We'd all almost certainly not make it. But for a lucky select few, government officials, scientists, hopefully plumbers, hopefully tabby cats, maybe we'd be able to get to one of the special nuclear bunker and control centres dotted around the UK and survive the nuclear holocaust and hopefully be the nucleus for the regeneration of our civilization. Rule Britannia. Oh, dearie me. Back in the 1960s, the specially selected important people, probably government officials of no use whatsoever to the future of our country, and probably the people who'd got us in this problem in the first place, would have hoped to have gone to one of the RSG, or regional seats of government locations, dotted around the country. Once inside, they'd have slammed the doors shut, adopted a fetal position and popped their fingers in their ears, and wait for whatever was occurring above them to dissipate enough so they could return to the surface, perhaps in many years' time. And you may ask, do these places still exist today, under our feet right now? And you'll be pleased to know that they do. Beneath the hills of the Black Country, just north of Kidderminster and south of Wolverhampton, barely visible from the Country Lane entrance and vital to the subterranean network of Cold War nuclear bunkers, lie a 3.5 mile subterranean complex of tunnels known as the Drakelow Tunnels. And that, guys, is the place that we're going to be visiting today in this video with you. We're going to take you down into Drakelow Tunnels with us in this YouTube video in the search for the control room that would have guided this country into its next iteration. Probably a little bit crispy around the edges, a little bit like burnt rashers of bacon on a Saturday morning. So, you know, you're going to be pretty gutted. Anyway, let's go. I've got to say, it was strange going into these massive blast doors thinking what could have happened 30 or 40 years beforehand, with people rushing in there desperately and slamming the doors behind them, not knowing whether they'd ever resurface again, and if they did, to what. So I'd organised this trip by having to speak directly to the people who run Drakelow Tunnels. So there's a couple of emails toing and froing to allow us onto a photography day, because not many people are really allowed down in the tunnels themselves. I'd taken along Noddy with me. For those of you who've watched this channel for a while, you'll know Noddy. If you haven't done, then lucky you. Also, I was with my mates Hass and Di, who I always go on holiday with to Fuerteventura and often document that on this channel as well. So if you haven't done yet, please hit the subscribe button. There's loads of history, documentaries and shenanigans on this channel too. Anyway guys, I've got to quieten down because it's the safety briefing.
But in other areas of the complex it is totally pitch black, so once again just be aware of where you're walking. If you need to set up your camera and then disappear and turn your light off, be aware of where you are when you're turning your light off. There are areas that are out of bounds. There's the fan area, which shouldn't have any ladder.
Yeah, I'm just going to ignore that because apparently we're going to be allowed to roam around these tunnels on our own. So let's sneak off into the first bit of tunnels. I'm going to show you this map, but to this day I actually don't know where we were on it while we were in there, and I still don't. And I'm pretty good with maps, to be honest, being a pilot. This wasn't helped by the fact that none of us were offered a map. They just weren't there to be had. I literally had no idea where we were. Because it was a photography day and this place is not set up as a museum or anything like that, and we had no guide decides we were just left to roam around 3.5 miles of tunnels completely alone. I knew now that our main objective of finding the control centre for this bunker during a nuclear war in the Cold War was going to be really difficult. So I decided to come here because I wasn't allowed to go into what's called the caution tunnels. And now we are in here just on our own. We've just been allowed to come in here on our own. It's just a little bit unnerving, isn't it? And you look at that, there's just like this dark door. And the tunnels here are massive. They're extensive, miles and miles and miles and miles and miles. It's a strange place. What do you think? Turn the torch on. Get the torch. Hello? Oh, it's a long way down there. I don't like that. Hello? Honestly, it's quite unnerving to look into complete pitch black and hear your voice echo down what is obviously a huge hall. It wasn't helped by the fact that without a map, we were already getting lost. Oh yeah, we came up this way earlier. So we must have come through that, up through that tunnel. Jesus, it's so easy to get lost. Look at the patterns of like the mould. There's lots of old bits of machinery down here as well, and kind of, so this is tunnel 4, isn't it? This is tunnel 4, this is like the main tunnel. We pressed on into a much darker part of the tunnel system, completely lost. I mean, it goes on behind me just there. That must be, what would you say it is, about 400 metres? So yeah, probably getting off a 0.5 kilometre tunnel. That is huge, isn't it? Right then, so Drakelow Tunnels are a former top secret underground military complex. Do you really want me to read all this? I mean, there's a lot here. Look how many pages there are. The tunnels were built between 1941 and 1942 as a shadow factory for the Rover car company. And I imagine they... I don't know. See, you always do this. You better not be doing this when we're going to the Holocaust Museum in Lithuania in a couple of months. After World War II, the tunnels began producing parts for tank engines until 1958, when the tunnels were handed over to the Ministry of Supply and later the Ministry of Works. And it is massive. I mean, this place goes on forever. It's just gigantic. So the Drakelow Tunnels were excavated following an idea in the mid-1930s of the Shadow Factory scheme. In 1936, the Air Ministry approached Rover, who employed a few thousand people, and commissioned them to produce parts for the Bristol aeroplanes, Mercury and Pegasus radial engines. In 1939, all hope of peace with Germany disappeared when Hitler invaded Poland, and the country and its manufacturing base were put on a war footing. On the nights of the 14th and 15th of November 1940, the city centre of Coventry was almost razed to the ground. Rover's St Helens plant north of the city centre was so badly damaged that production was halted indefinitely. They couldn't take another bombing like the one they'd suffered at Coventry, therefore the location for the new factory would be underground. It was now that the brainchild of Sir Alexander Gibb, consultant engineer and designer of Rover No. 1D Shadow Factory, pressed into use his design for an underground grid system factory at the site in Drakelow. So yeah, we were in the generator room earlier on, and obviously that's where all the power for this place is generated. And you can see it in the lights there. Dynamo of the generator going round, the lights kind of go dim, and it's quite atmospheric that it keeps sort of going woo, 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 woo. I don't know if you can see it at the moment. Can you see it in the background? Like what it's doing? Really weird. There's also there's a lovely big lathe down here, and I really want a lathe. Wood turning in the shed, that'd be really cool. Really large old bits of machinery down here. It was amazing how much of the old machinery that was used to build the aeroplane parts and was used inside the bunker during World War II and the Cold War was still here today. Hunks of metal littered the tunnels and corridors. It's hard to imagine how busy and how noisy it would have been down in these tunnels during their use, especially now with old partition walls falling apart in the damp atmosphere. Still there today were the old corridor clocks, frozen in time from the last time they were used. And the tannoy system that they used to play music to the employees to keep their morale up while they built engines during the Second World War. Even the old canteen was still there, albeit with a few modern bits that I think someone had just added a few years ago. Back in the darkness and still lost without a map, we found what we were told by another wandering photographer were the check-in and clock-in, clock-out rooms for the employees of the plant during World War II. So apparently this used to be the timekeeper's bit. So when you were coming into work, you'd clock in and they'd go, right, well done, you've clocked in. And here we've got the actual bit. Some of you are going to recognise this if you work in factories especially, or large places where there's lots of people working. The old clocking in sheet holders for the employees were still there, along with rusting lumps of machinery that we had no idea what they were used for. The decaying rooms, the mould, the damp, the cold seemed to go on forever, and around every corner was another dilapidated old room, and we had no idea what they were used for. And after a while it felt like it gnawed away at your very soul just being down there. We found also what we were told was the infirmary by another guy who was walking around. So this place apparently had 700 people working down here during World War II. Each section had its own toilet. They didn't like people spending a lot of time walking to and from the loos, so they had them down there. And we were speaking to this guy. They do a lot of paranormal stuff here. There's a lot of people who believe this place is haunted because there were 3 deaths during the build. They had a tunnel collapsed. A couple of deaths actually on the site outside as well, like motorcycle accidents and things like that. So that's it. I'm getting back towards the light now. Right, there was, I think, I don't know where we haven't completely lost now. Yeah, workers lived on site. They got bussed in and out. Because I was just trying to find out what the conditions for work were around here. We were finally starting to get our bearings and realised that there was one part of the tunnel system that we hadn't explored yet, and this area also had the public toilets for us to use as well. We made our way over to that part of the tunnels, about a 5-minute walk, and as soon as we got in there we knew that this was the centre that would have been used in the event of a nuclear war to control this region of the country. This was later confirmed to us when we found one of the guides roaming through the tunnels. This area would have held one of the regional seats of government, and later the regional government headquarters. These phone lines would have been connected using the message switching exchange to the central government war headquarters in Wiltshire, with a dedicated emergency line to the Home Office and direct communication with the military. Here the BBC would also broadcast a series of pre-recorded messages that would be transmitted all across the British Isles. Once NATO had confirmed an attack, the government would have given the BBC the code word Mac Morris. This instructed the BBC to activate 24-hour operations. If the situation worsened, codename Shadwell would be issued to the BBC. This would initiate the second phase of the precautionary pre-recorded announcements, which advised the public on retuning their radios and when to listen for the next broadcast. At this stage, it would only be a matter of time until the UK would have been hit by nuclear weapons. Back in the light now, but this would have been the dorms. I think they had ladies' and men's dorms, and they were separate, obviously, because of rampant love making would ensue. But I'm fairly sure a more amorous type person would still have found a way. I mean, imagine that guy rotting in the caves. One further thing I noticed before leaving that I thought was actually quite sinister was the fact that every toilet cubicle we saw in the Cold War section of the tunnels had a viewing glass into the cubicle. I couldn't figure out why. Was it to stop someone who might have been a spy who'd got into the bunker from doing something? Or could it have been a preventative measure for someone who was so desperate in the weeks and months after a nuclear war that it would have stopped them from taking their own life? Boom. That's hammering down with rain out here now. So there we go, that's it. Drakelow Tunnels done. Bit disappointed, but at the same time, sometimes you've got to sort of put your neck on the line to find out what's in somewhere. And also, you know, what did I want to take away from this? Hopefully a good film for you guys so we could learn about this place. But it'd be easier to do, especially since it's £40 a head to be here. They hopefully reinvest some of that money and put it in a proper museum and that sort of thing, so that'd be nice. But we shall see. Hopefully we'll come back here in 3 or 4 years' time to find that they've got a fully functioning museum, and it all looks absolutely class. It was admittedly a strange trip. I don't usually spend my Sundays driving across the country going down tunnels, put it that way. And it would have been lovely to have had the opportunity to learn about this place while we were there and not have to do it retrospectively, which is what I've had to do to research for this video. That being said, without going there, I never would have sat down and done the research to go into this film, found the photos of Drakelow Tunnels being used in the past, and it was an interesting trip. I suppose you could rate it in the fact that it actually made me look into this and create this video for you. So I hope you've enjoyed watching it, guys. Please hit the subscribe button, please hit the bell so you get a notification when we upload a new video. Hit the like as well, that'd be lovely, and comment on what you thought those peepholes were used for in those toilets. Have a great week, guys, and I'll see you in the next Times with James video. We've got loads coming up with the tuk-tuk, the studio build. I've also got some lighting projects that I'm going to film and put on here as well, so there's lots of things going on. And also I'll be popping to Fuerteventura for my yearly holiday, and you can come along with us on that trip as well on this channel. Thanks very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you soon.